All right, welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast. Trottie, how you going, man?
Very good. Thank you for having me. I know we've been trying to set this up for a little while, so I really appreciate you being patient, and it's good to be here.
Mate, yeah, no, yeah. When I first started this in a couple of years ago, when I was over living in Bali, and I was looking at my hit list, and I was looking through my Instagram, obviously, and I was like, oh man, I'd love to get Trottie. And I guess the people who have seen the headline for this podcast, and seen the guest and seen the Instagram stuff that's kind of popped up, I guess everyone has a really good understanding of who you are, Trottie. But what I want to kind of get into is obviously some stories around, the kingdom there. And I also want to kind of find out how this all started for you. I did do a little bit of a Wikipedia run on you last night and kind of seen a few things. But can you tell me, I guess, what your role is at Taylormade? And then how did that come to fruition? What's the short story?
A short story is tricky on it because I adapted and changed so much throughout it. The bottom line is right now I'm an ambassador for Taylormade, which is amazing to say that. It's a fantastic company. So to get myself into like a ambassadorial role there through social media is brilliant. From where I started, that is, which I'm sure we'll cover. I was working on the tour. So at one point I was, I think the title was something like Global Tours or International Tours Director for Taylormade. So they love a title in America, and that was beautiful and it was good. It basically means you're prepared.
Sorry, do you want to know what the actual title is?
Yeah, go on.
It's called Director of Global Tours Sports Marketing for Taylormade Golf.
Yeah, it's
nice. What the fuck was that?
Nice style. It basically means you're the guy that, and at one point in my career, if you're in Japan, Korea, Australia would be included, Southeast Asia, even Europe, and there's someone that is like really special, you've got to make it happen. That's pretty much, that gig in a nutshell.
Cool. All right, kick on. Yeah, so anyway, so I cut you off. Yeah. But what about you? A bit of a player back in the day? You had to go, right?
Yeah, a long time ago, I could play pretty good. And, I actually stopped playing golf for about 10 years. And when I picked it back up, I thought it would be quite easy to pick it back up. And I'm realizing it's not as easy as it perhaps should have been. It just takes a lot of time. You have to, and obviously now with this whole new gig and the social media and stuff like that, you're sort of someone. I saw it described the other day, like you're living with all eyes on you, but you're no longer living sort of like you're trying to get your golf game back together, but you're not doing it quietly on your own. You're sort of doing it in a public eye, which is tricky, but it's good. I'm enjoying the process, I guess, and I'm working at it.
When you're playing all those YouTube kind of stuff and matches, because I'll watch them, right? I really enjoy them. Are you playing a flat out match? Or are you guys talking off camera a little bit? Like, you're trying your best. Like, is it kind of a little bit scripted? Like, how does it kind of go?
It's never scripted, but it's
I shouldn't say scripted. Yeah,
it's a lot of chat off camera, and the hardest part is, and the boys won't allude to it, but the Barstool game, the final day at Stream Song, it was really windy, and I don't think YouTube did it justice. And I doubled the first, and then I played well until the ninth. Bogey 10, and we did a part 1, part 2. And on the 11th green, which they never put in, there was an exchange over putts. Like someone took a putt that I was like, well, hang on, not sure that was good. Then they hit it, miss it, and we end up with this big like drama to the point where I turned and said to like the producer, I said, listen, boys, you're making me look an arse here because I'm the one that didn't want to give the putt. Like we can't go in the edit. But from there on, I didn't play particularly well. They gave me a putt of like 5 feet on the next because they knew I was pissed. And I was like, fuck, guys, what are you doing like that? How can you give me that now? And it just rolled into. But I spoke to the boys afterwards, and I love those guys at Barstool. And making content is an art. So, I appreciate you touched on how you used to play. Playing, and I'm sure you've been around a lot of players or played yourself, like playing is an art, and playing the game and scrambling is an art. Being around tour players and working with them is an art. Media with them is definitely something you have to manage, just like fitting is, as in any great coach will do. And playing
Yeah.
YouTube golf it's a form of golf. Is it what I love the game for? Maybe not. Like playing
Yeah.
at one point, tournament golf was great. Golf with your buddies is great, but it's certainly an avenue to get better at. And the Grant Horvats of this world, I mean, all credit to him. He's brilliant at it. He's really good at playing YouTube golf for sure. And he's a great player anyway, but to play YouTube golf, he's phenomenal at it.
What before we get into some other stuff, but I'm interested kind of because I love YouTube golf. I think people out there, I saw the TV ratings right for the Masters, and I think it was a bit difficult to kind of put it because they were measuring alongside last year's Masters, which was on Easter weekend, and when John Rahm won versus this one, it was a 20% down in viewership. But they're noticing that there's been a huge increase in kind of watching it through the streaming devices on people's phones and kind of catching, Instagram all's gone up like 16%, 20%. It's all gone up a lot. People are watching golf differently. But I also put a lot of that down to YouTube golf because, I'm telling you now, every kind of newbie recreational golfer who I teach who comes and sees me, I say, oh, do you watch golf? Because I always say, do you watch golf? Like, who do you like? Like talk about golf. And I tell you what, I'm saying 8 out of 10 will tell me a YouTuber.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I think that to sort of put this onto my career and journey that I was talking about with someone yesterday, you've got to be prepared to pivot. And I think anyone who's listening to this that wants to have a career in golf, obviously you've put some great stuff out with teachers. I've seen some fitness guys and things like that. But the bottom line is you've always got to be prepared to pivot. And I think that was the thing that I was very much prepared to do. Tried to play really high level amateur golf as a kid, then tested the waters in America for college, university, went back, did my British PGA, then was just prepared to move, stop playing golf, focus on my career. And all roads come back to doing what you want to do. I mean, the fact now I've just had 3 days in Bandon Dunes, which is why I'm wearing the hat. And it's like, to do that and to be taking people away that are helping with your business is amazing. So you end up where you're meant to be with it. At times it's very difficult because you find yourself, I don't know, like I was in a hotel room at an event in Korea overlooking like a ski hill, like a ski jump with no snow on it. And I'm just like, what am I doing here? Like, I want to be on the PGA Tour. But that was the journey that I had to take to do that,
Yeah. And one thing, like when I hear stuff like that, and, we probably like, I get asked all the time from coaches that want to pivot a little bit as well, right? They might be a head professional in a golf and they go, I want to get into online golf coaching, or I want to do this. And when I kind of see what you do, and it's one explanation I use a lot, it's just like go 100% in one way, give it your all. And then once it's done, or you need to pivot, then go 100% in the other way. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you'll get there a lot quicker and you'll get things done instead of, I'm still having the same conversation with people 5 years ago who are trying to get out of their current situation. I'm sitting there going, come on, go. You know what I mean? Just go. Like move in that direction.
Yeah, I will say it took me 2 years to make the decision to go all in on Trottie Golf. But that's to make the leap. The decision to do it was made maybe 3 years ago. But it took me two to get to this stage. The decision to work on the PGA Tour, I made that decision when I quit playing golf at like 22, 23 years old. When I realized I wasn't going to be a player, I was like, right, what do I love? I like coaching and I like equipment. Okay, what am I best at? Probably equipment, to be fair. And it was like, right, let's go 100% into that. And then the CEO of Taylormade said to me about, which is stuck with me already, he said about being like narrow and deep in a field is important. And I think that to your point, I've gone very narrow and very deep into the equipment world. I can't see me coming out of it. I could see me teaching people that I want to teach down the line, but I don't know if I can see me, doing 5 days of teaching a week. I don't see that. Just because I think when I was on the tour one week and I'd started the Trottie Golf Media channels, it's like I went away to a tournament somewhere, adjusted someone's loft on something, did loft and lies on another, fit a driver for someone. These are the best players in the world, but I did like 3 things in 3 days. And I was stood there going, what am I doing here? When I could create a video and at that time hit 40,000 people. I was like, okay, that's much more fulfilling for me as a golfer and the journey that I've been on to try and pass that on to other people. But I think to your point, Toby, like if these people aren't prepared to up and change and evolve, I think evolve is something we've mentioned already, even in the short time we've been speaking. You've got to
Yeah.
evolve what you're doing, otherwise you're not gonna get anywhere. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what the best coaches in the world do with their players, and I think that's what the best people at all walks of life are doing. You know, they're just evolving.
100%. I really like that. But when you did with that, you said it took 2.5 years with Trottie Golf, but it's because the side hustle became too much that you couldn't ignore it anymore. You know what I mean? Like call it the side hustle, whatever they call it, but it's the thing that you were doing that you're passionate about. All of a sudden it grew enough that you could jump all in, right?
100%. But on the same note, it was never a side hustle. It was,
Yeah.
and that's the I struggle a bit with. Like the only times I've ever struggled with my job is when I perhaps haven't felt particularly well and had to take a really early flight somewhere, or
Yeah.
I've got bored of the process. So when you're in
I get it.
I was on
Mm.
year 18 on the tour, and I was like, am I really doing this again? Like those last couple of years became tough
Mm.
because you go through the process, and the guy I always talk about is like Martin Keimer. I knew Martin pretty well as an early 20-year-old guy, and I
Yeah.
got to work with him and watch him win multiple majors and work on his golf clubs. That
Mm.
then evolved, and I was sat at dinner with the new breed of player, and it was Morikawa and it was Wolfie, and I remember being at dinner with those guys, and they're great guys, but sat there thinking, do I, do I have the energy to do this again? Like I'm
Mm.
going to go through all this. Yeah, I have a career and I'm getting paid by a company to be here. That's great. But you've got to be invested into that
Yeah.
individual schedule. You've got to be invested into like any new equipment that's coming out. I was like, I don't know. And that's when the
Mm.
social media really started to take off because it was obviously a new thing anyway, definitely new to the game of golf. But I
Yeah.
was doing it and it was just so easy for me to do. It wasn't
Mm.
hard and it was fun. And then I started to get a lot of reaction to it. And then, to be fair, the PGA Tour got a little weird about it because they were like, hey, we might need you to stop doing this on site because they realized it was strong. And obviously, that then, where's that sit in their brand? And that was the moment for me when I got that phone call from them. I was like, listen, in my mind, I'm sat there going, this is something. If you've got the attention of the people that
Yeah.
run the PGA Tour and Taylormade Golf, then you are onto something. And now what you have to do is you have to go as hard at this as you can and treat this like a job, which I then
Mm.
did. And then from
Yeah.
there, it was like 2 years until I said, now I've got to make a decision. And obviously, fortunately, look, TaylorMade is a very forward-thinking company, and credit to all those guys. They could have just said to me, Trottie, we're not having this. But they weren't
Yeah.
really like that. They were like, mate, you've been good and you've supported us as a business and you represent us well. We want to partner with you going forward. So
Cool.
that speaks volumes for a company as well,
100%. I love that. I think, yeah, TaylorMade are definitely in the forefront of, and I just love the way that branding's gone. It used to be so exclusive, and that's the one thing I do love about the social media now. Like, I don't go on there, a lot anymore, but there's so much cool access we're getting now, and it's coming through the actual companies. You know what I mean? It's coming through TaylorMade, like you guys putting out that YouTube stuff. That's what's really like. It's behind the ropes, and it's so eye opening. But when you're on tour, right, and you're kind of working on Martin Keimer's clubs, I did see. I saw an old video of you from like 2011 talking to Martin Keimer
We're in
with
Dubai, yeah.
with your Adidas kit on.
Yeah.
What what does a week look like? So when Martin, just kind of use Martin Keimer as a case study, kind of coming into the work, like into the truck. What does it look like? Like,
So
what are
if
you
we just
doing?
back up a minute here and just talk about content in general, you got to remember when
Yep.
a big name player signs with a golf company, they have a number of days that they will have to give that company. So the contracts are structured that they got to play the golf clubs, they've got to go out and perform, and then they'll hit certain bonus levels. But then you have
Yeah.
service days, what they're deemed as.
Yeah.
And I think that in this day and age, a service day is now used to create content because you can
Yeah.
capture the moment and then you can release it when they're hot or trending. So, for example, Tommy Fleetwood goes and does well around an event, then you release Tommy Fleetwood content. So I think that the companies have been smart as to how they've leveraged the time they have with the assets that are the players.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of getting down to business and what does a golf tournament look like, I think it's changed a lot. I think now, obviously, analytics is huge in professional sport, not just golf. So I think that players come in now with data based on the golf course they're playing. And I don't think this, I know it. Like the
Yeah.
reason Rory played in Phoenix a few years ago is because data showed the way he drives the golf ball, that event needed to be added to his schedule because the data's showing that he should perform better there. And then the knock
Oh.
on effect of rounds played prior to Augusta, this is what you need to do with your scheduling. So these players know when they need to come into town. They know how much they need to work on. They know what they need to work on, and they know why they need to work on it. So I think having gone through 20 years of this, I saw a generation of players that would come on and say, this doesn't feel right. I want to do this, this, and this, which was amazing for my development as a club fitter, to a generation of players that came on and said, my numbers are doing this. I need an outcome
Mm.
that is different, and I need this outcome. And this is why. So having the experience of worked pre-launch monitors, pre-data to then deep data and launch monitors really made like the breeder guys that are out there now, of which I'm one of, who are working on those tour trucks, especially for the brands like Taylormade. You need to be, like I said a little while back, like fully invested. You can't
Mm.
be guessing on Keimer's schedule, or Morikawa would be the equivalent today. You
Yeah.
can't be guessing on where he's going to play. You got to know. And then from a brand point of view, which is often overlooked, you got to know what clubs are coming. You got to know what you need to sell. So you got to be, once you get great at these jobs, you're quite close to the sales team and the VP of sales. You need to know what needs to sell in that part of the country. So say if you're going to go to an event in Boston and they might have a shed load of wedges that aren't selling, well, let's get on it. Like, let's get a wedge story going that now on this day and age, you try and capture for social media. Obviously, I have my own social media, so I
Yeah.
could create my own buzz around whatever I was doing on any given week to then help
Mm.
drive sales for the company. So
Ah.
you're often like with spider putters, for example, I did that in the last couple of years. That was a tough job, but we had the number one model on tour for the spider putter. But fitting
Yep.
putters on tour it's all done on stats. You can't fit putters like you would with a launch monitor. You have to do it based on stats. You have to do it based on performance and strokes gained. And quite often that is a delicate conversation with a tour player around an area that is extremely sensitive. It can go south at any given moment.
Yep.
And they don't want to overcomplicate things. I mean, I think one of the biggest things I've noticed about talking on YouTube about clubs and talking about equipment and talking about swings and talking about technique, it screws your own game, because when we were all great at golf, we didn't have any of this stuff in our mind. So
Yep.
these tour players, they want it as simple as possible. They don't want to know if the CG location is wherever it is or why you're doing this. They don't care. They just want to
Mm.
know that the club does the job, which I think if you
Mm.
look now, and obviously it's become far more prominent in the last few years, last 2 decades for sure, like women's golf, and you look at how that's developing, and Charlie Hull, she's amazing. She's just an out and out gamer. It's no
Yep.
surprise that she works with Matt Belsham. Again, he's a no BS guy, and she's no BS with her golf game. And
Yeah.
they're generally the ones that can manage the noise and get it done and become great players. But it's in terms of a typical week, if
Yeah.
you don't have the club adjustments done by midday Tuesday, then you're struggling. Like
Mhm.
you've got to get, so the player might not be on site till Monday night, and you've got Tuesday morning to make it happen. Which obviously is why I then went heavy on Tour Truck Tuesday, because Tuesdays were just like inherently absolutely crazy.
And what are you doing with like the club? So Martin, what he drops them into you?
No, I
Sorry,
mean,
Colin. I say Colin on.
so on the European tour, the way we would do it is every Wednesday night or Wednesday afternoon, we would, or even Tuesday afternoon, we would gather as many of the, and we had a lot of staff players at this point in time. We had like 70 odd, and we would
Wow.
spec everyone's clubs as off. So like we'd use the truck as a bag storage. We'd stay late on a Tuesday and just get everyone's specs on. Back then it was an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
PGA Tour, guys can ship clubs in a day from Carlsbad to wherever, so specs are
Yeah.
kept in-house. We decided on the European Tour at that time when Martin was there that, Tuesday nights we'd get all that done. So
Yeah.
if we weren't working on equipment, we'd be checking his stuff on a Tuesday and
Yeah.
then knowing what his schedule was, where he was going to play, what his shot shape, what his pattern is, we would either suggest changes or if trusted, which we were with guys like him, we just make changes to his golf clubs to keep them where they need to be. Like John Rahm
Wow.
would change his putter spec every week. Jason Day would change it based on where the greens are and what the speed is. You'd be going through this all the time. Rory would change model of driver every now and again, looking at spin rates. But if something came out that was beneficial to them, then we'd make an active beeline to get that done before
Yeah.
Tuesday, 1 p.m.,
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking as well, like when I was looking at the time when you've been through your whole club fitting career and how much it's changed, and I kind of see when it switched into the data. And I thought to myself that it definitely takes, it would take a really big skill, the skill of club fitting, to ask the right questions when working with these guys, I'm assuming as well, and answering them the right way as well, using the proper language, like you say, that they're the driver of the race car and you're just the mechanic, right? Well, not just the mechanic, you're the mechanic, right? And they don't want to hear all the mechanics information that's kind of going on. They just want to know how to drive the car. So, and I think it would be very sensitive to make sure that you do ask the right questions, and then, yeah, to try and get the answers that you need. But you've also got that data as well these days as well that doesn't kind of, which would have made it a lot easier for you, I'm assuming as well. Like that kind of evolution of club fitting would have been crazy.
Easier and tougher. I mean, if
Yeah.
you think about it, so the point you picked up is a great one. My boss during the time on the PGA Tour literally said to me midway through my career, he's like, "You got to say less. Like sometimes you just say too much." And
Mhm.
at the time, I thought, this guy's taking the piss. He doesn't know anything. What's he going on about? But he was right. And like
Mm.
I'm very chatty, obviously big personality, and you can see that, I think, in my social media. But with
Yeah.
working with tour players, the likes of Brooks and DJ, they were an acquired taste for me because I had to realize like less is so much more with those guys. They do
Yeah.
not want to know. So when you put down a launch monitor and there's 16 to 20 tiles of information, you need, to your point, is that helping you or hurting you? Well, it depends on the player because
Mm.
Dustin really only looks at carry. He doesn't care about any of them. Darren Clark, he cares about carry. But then you get someone like a Goose or a Garcia who are a bit more switched onto it and they want to know everything. So
Mm.
Rosie, Morikawa, they want to know a lot. Wolfie just wants to know if you think it's good or not. So
Yeah.
it's knowing the individual that you're with, it's knowing how much you can say to them, and it's judging. The biggest one is judging where you are at time in the week, and also
Yeah.
communicating with the coach and communicating with the caddy. And if you're last pickings on a Wednesday, then tread very carefully with what you say
Yeah.
because that can really impact the first round.
Have you ever had any scenarios? Because, I've spoken with my players who, were first jumped onto tours and there's a tour truck there, right? And it's a new experience for them because, a lot of my players, when I was playing on, the circuits here in Australia, there's no tour trucks, right? And they just go to the tournament and they just kind of play golf. And then all of a sudden they get to a tournament and there's tour trucks there and it's like, oh, I got gear here. You know what I mean? And there's gear here. I can get this check. I can get this changed. I want to, I hit 2 drives that I didn't like. I want to go look at this shaft and look at this head, look at this spin. You know what I mean? Like to me as well, like that was a learning curve for a lot of players kind of getting onto tour to make sure that they weren't, I'm not going to say looking for an excuse each time, but making too many changes and all of a sudden trying a different driver shaft at the end of each day. And, yeah, it was definitely a new experience. Have you kind of felt like you've seen players come in and panic a little bit in regards to their game and making changes and think to yourself, you just need to hit the range? Or have you ever had many of those scenarios?
Absolutely. Just guys that would have just ruined by it. Ruined.
Yeah.
But what these guys don't understand, and the question that people, the what people don't get, the companies spend a lot of money on servicing these players. So if a
Mm,
rep has showed up in Australia, the reason they've
mm,
gone to Australia is it was often the time with us. is to win a driver count. Nowadays, we'd go to Australia, if truth be told, to service someone who's a big name player. Like I told you earlier, there were 70 odd contracts in Europe. Now,
Yeah.
globally, there's probably less than 30. You know what I mean? It's like you've got
Yeah.
the best of the best, and that's it. So the job has changed. But back in the early 2000s, when driver count was massive, I'd go down to Australia with 60 clubs, maybe for a week, maybe for two. And the goal was to come back with none. And the goal
Yeah.
was to find every tour player in Australia that was thinking they weren't driving it right and to change them. And I'm an extremely good salesman. And then you add a launch monitor into it, and I'm as good as
Yeah.
it gets. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we would turn
Yeah.
up at some tournaments, heavy, tightless places, and we'd be 21 drivers behind on Monday. And it would be like, yeah, how many do you want to win by? Let's go. We'll get this done. We can switch 20, we can switch 11 tightless guys. That's easy. No problem.
Yeah.
And that's a two-way swing. And then we'd end up winning those things by like 35. So people
Yeah.
think, oh, well, they're going there as club fitters. We're going there as salesmen who can fit golf clubs. And by the way, when
Yeah.
we're giving the clubs away, and no doubt the driver is better for you. Is it better for you this week at this golf course in these conditions that are windy and you've played not under this pressure? If I was a player, I wouldn't change. But that's
Yes.
me. And obviously, the sexiness of changing into a new driver when you've had some kid from England tell you it's the daddy who works with the best players in the world, it's a
Yeah.
pretty good sell, And you're hitting it
Yeah.
320 down the driving range. You're like, geez, I should probably use this.
Yeah. Mate, I've seen so many, dude, like when Aussie Open, a guy I was helping out and get to the putting green. I'm like, I haven't seen this putter before. Oh, yeah, I just got it. I was like, mate, you're playing the biggest tournament of your life, pal. You know what I mean? You've just got this new putter. I know, it's a nice Scottie. I get it. But,
Yeah. No,
right.
golfers can't help themselves. It's and everyone's got like a weak area, and obviously the putting green's even worse. Which is
Yeah.
why the job in the end was so great in the sense that, and it is in today's world, everything is backed up with data. Every
Yeah.
decision, every club change, data,
Yeah.
data, data. So you got to evolve. When I used to
Yeah.
go down to Australia, it was purely in a sales role, effectively with a launch monitor. Now, if
Yeah.
you're going down there, you just go armed with a ton of data, but you don't have to change 30 guys. You can go in there just, if people want your help, well, yeah, I'm going to take an hour probably of your time, and then I'm going to go on the golf course with you, and I'm going to make sure this is perfect. And then if you play it, that's up to you. But the reason we're doing this is because we probably believe you can get on the PGA Tour. And if we believe you can get on the PGA Tour, then we think you're going to be one of the best players in the world. So we want to probably talk about contracts now. And if you don't want that conversation, stick with whatever equipment you're using, and you don't have the support of Taylormade until you're ready. And that's fine. Good luck with it. But Taylormade will go all in now on the people that they choose,
Yeah. And I want to ask you one more club fitting question, because I think a lot of recreational golfers, and we'll have a lot that listen to this, a lot of golf coaches, a lot of elite players, but the recreational golfer, I've been witnessing a lot of club fitting. So I have club fitting, at the range where I teach out of, and I help the brand that I'm kind of affiliated with at times, and I've noticed that the driver fitting, it seems to be a lot quicker these days. Well, fitting in general seems to be a lot quicker, and obviously this is kind of driven by the data that you talk about there, right? That's kind of popping up on TrackMan. And it seems like the customer what I'm trying to get at here, it nearly looks like they feel like they're getting shortchanged because the process is a lot quicker because they're getting to the results quicker. Is that true? Like, is club fitting these days happening fast? Like, I watched a fitting with you once, just with I can't remember who it was, but you did a club fitting for a driver on your YouTube channel. And it seemed like you got everything matched up very fast.
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
That's point number one. But I mean, for me, if I had you on a range, I'd like to think we'd be done in 40 minutes, to be honest, for the whole
Full bag?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? We'd go the putting green after 40 minutes. Like,
And I actually, because I saw you talk about, right? I think, you're the probably number one fitter in the world, right? What I've seen in regards to especially popularity. But I saw you talk about as well with driver fitting about going past an optimal stage in regards to how many
Yeah,
swings they should make.
100%.
What is that? How
When
many?
you're working with Darren Clark, it was so difficult because Clarkey gets obsessed by the numbers and the
Mm.
distance, and it just turns into a long drive situation. And if you get in that situation, you're no longer seeing the true Darren Clark. So I'll be honest. I was. It was early on in my career when I got to work with him quite a bit when he was at the peak of his powers, and it was difficult, really, really tough. Big personality, difficult, and you would have to manage it and stop him and get in the way and stand in the way of the balls. There was a clip that went out on Taylormade social media of me standing in the way of Rory hitting a shot at the photo shoot. That was just all it had to happen. The day needed to move on. He's hitting too many shots, and obviously I get nailed for it in the comments on social media, which is fine. But the bottom line
Yes.
is like that is what you have to do, because if you get past the window, then it's depreciating. And we had a spell in South Africa when Rory was using a Callaway driver early on before he signed with us, and he hit balls there and then tore a rib or whatever he did. And it's like all those things are just too many balls. These guys are hitting at full speed now. So
Mm.
absolutely, there is a bell curve. There is a peak performance area. I think as I've got better, more efficient. But I'm like, if it's more than the talk boys, if they hit it more than twice and it's not right, then the club's not right. These
Yeah.
guys are so good. Like
Yeah.
you don't need just adjust to the club. No, mate, you've got a whole tour truck there. Go and
Yeah.
adjust the golf club and let me hit good golf shots. So I think that that's a big one, and I think you don't need 1,000 shots. Now the problem
Mm.
is it's fitting a consumer. Different story. People are coming in. They want an experience. They want to be go through a service and things like that. I think tour fitting is much like having a race car that is stripped down. It's just the chassis and the car. And then if you're going into one of these fancy fitting centers, it's probably more like getting in a fancy Range Rover that has heavy
Yeah.
seats, doesn't move so great. The air conditioning and the speakers are fantastic, but it's
Mm.
not. It's not where it is.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. All right. Well, and then we're going to move into, I want to talk to you about some Taylormade stories, right? But before we get to there, right, at the Kingdom there with some of the players. So I'm fascinated by it. Before we get to there, right, we have the Back to Basics putting segment. So one of the sponsors of the podcast called Back to Basics putting mirrors. Yeah, use code TM15, 15% off. Number one putting mirror out there, designed by Grant Field and Richard Woodhouse. It's got a 15-degree little putting arc on it there, Trottie, and you can also see your path to face relationship when looking down on it. Support those who support the podcast, TM15 for 15% off down below. Trottie, in the Back to Basics putting segment here, do you have a putting tip or something that you can share with us that might better our game or better our coaching in regards to, to take to the putting green? What have you got for us?
Can I ask a question first about the mirror?
Yes.
How do you know that 15 degrees is right for everybody?
Well, that's a great question. I think it was measured between PGA Tour averages between 12 and 19. So they cut it in half,
Okay.
15. And then when they had the 15 degrees there, that's kind of where they drew the middle line. Now, you don't have to obviously use the 15 degrees exactly, but it does give you a good kind of a guideline, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I like it.
Because most mirrors are straight, right? So
Yeah.
it's a glass mirror that sits on the ground. I'll show you it. I got it here.
Grab one. I'm interested.
Here you go. This is it here.
Okay.
So the guy who designed it, Grant Field, Cam Smith's coach.
Yeah.
So see the arc?
Yeah.
Here. So then this is the putter face alignments here that are 90 to the arc.
What happens if you're a lefty?
This one's not, but it's double-sided. So you flip it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the other one in my bag there. This is actually a prototype. I'm not too sure if it's public yet, but
it looks sturdy, because the problem with those mirrors is sometimes that they warp.
Yes. Well, this one is sturdy, and I will say this because it's not the cheapest one. It's probably the most expensive one, and it's quite hard, and it's one of those ones, and they're quite good as well. Like if you do break it, which is can get in your travel and can happen, right? They often replace it and look after you. So it's a proper one. It's not like those eyeline, or I shouldn't say that, like a cheap one that might just snap or break, or you know what I mean? You can feel like it's quite thick.
Yeah.
And it comes with the gates as well. But anyways, that's enough promotion on that.
No, it
Have you
is.
got
But
a
the thing is, though, it's important because you asked me then about a putting tip, and I have a video that I do that was shown to me by, I can't remember who, but it was about setting up launch monitor. And I'll do this one because we're doing an equipment thing. But
Yeah, of course.
you mentioned gates and you mentioned mirror, and
Yeah.
basically, I think gates and mirrors and chalk lines are essential. If you look at the best players in the world, that's what they're doing all the time. However, the tip I would give for someone is that you create your own launch monitor. So you take your cell phone, iPhone, whatever you use, put it on slow-mo, and you put it down and you put the ball in front of that with a Sharpie line on it, or you put the logo of the manufacturer or the model. You draw a line on the green. Then you go 2 golf ball widths, which actually is the same as this iPhone. I don't know what model it is. You put another line in there, and then you go 1 more golf ball and you put a line in there. So on the green, you have 3 lines. One, which you're going to put the logo of the ball in and the phone on. The next one is 2 golf ball widths away, and the one is a ball width after that. 3 lines. You take a 15-foot putt, no target. You hit that putt. And what you're looking for is after the strike, the ball to have started. So if this is my Taylormade logo or TP5 logo, as soon as you strike, you want that to have started to change degrees of angles. And then you want the ball in the air until or landing as close to the second line as possible. Now, look, if you're playing on greens like Poana, which over here in the States, a bit bumpy, Torrey Pines, you might want that ball in the air closer to the third line. And then if you're playing somewhere that's filthy good, usually TPC Boston and places like that, you want that ball on the green rolling as close to line 2 as possible. So anyone out there who's listening to this, who's looking for a putting tip, yeah, without question, I'm going to stand there and say, get on your mirrors, get on your gates, do your stuff to make sure that's all dialed, get consistency. But at the end of the day, get the right loft on your putter, because you might just be missing because you've got too much loft on.
I think that's fantastic, and I think it's something that's definitely overlooked. What is the standard loft on a putter, Trottie? Is it 3.75? Is that what they're coming out at, or what is it? Do you know? I'm sure you know.
Yeah, if you're playing a mallet and you're playing on PGA Tour greens, you probably want a spider to be around 1.25 if you're on great PGA Tour greens. If you're moving to like medium PGA Tour greens and you've got a spider, you want to be on 2. If you're on Poana, you want to get to 2.25. If you're using a blade, because of the CG projection through the face. So if you think about it, this is like a mid mallet Del Monte, but the CG here is kind of here. But if you've got a blade, it's going to be closer to the leading edge, so you want more loft. That's why you answered 3.75. So you can play your blades around 3.75, and as you move into better greens, you want to get down to about 3.25. But your mallets, which is why they generally roll the ball a little bit better, that and the fact that if you strike them away from the center, they're not going to twist as easy. Your mallets, you absolutely want to play them with less loft.
That's fantastic. Now, can you tell me what would be a side effect that would happen from a player that has a putter that let's say they got jumped on Poana and they didn't have enough loft on their putter? What would you see happen after they strike it?
So Jason Day had this when we went out to, we had his East Coast great loft on poor greens. And you're talking about one of the best, well, not one of, in my opinion, the best putter I think I've ever worked with, without question. And bottom line is that ball was just going into the turf, immediately up, and then bouncing. So it's bouncing. Like when you've got that camera on slow-mo, that thing is just bobbling out of the screen altogether. So you got no control whatsoever. None. But loft on putters, I mean, if Jason and John Rahm and those, but Dustin are checking it every week. I mean, I've got a Dustin putter spec on my phone for every tour stop he goes to, and we used to check it every week. And it was like, look, mate, this is what you play here. This is why. This is what you played when you won. And he'd keep on top of it every week. And it's crucial. That, and to your point, the mirrors and the start lines and the gates, and just making sure that you're reading the greens the same as your caddy. That on tour is all big, big things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So when a ball like so with less loft, are they, you say you get loss of control. I'll just kind of ask you a question here. I know the ball goes into the green, right? Does it also struggle with the start line of it as well? Does it skirt off to the side, or does it just kind of just kill it into the green? So it hasn't got enough loft.
Yeah, I think I missed the start of the question, but I think you're saying that when that ball bounces into the turf, what does it do? I think, yes, it's going to screw with the start line for sure. It's going to
Yeah.
screw with the roll, because the reason the putters nowadays all have these grooves on, it's not just to look
Yeah.
fancy, it's to create forward momentum and forward roll, or get that
Yeah.
ball into forward momentum as quick as possible. I think if you go back in time, and there's a slow-mo clip of Ian Woosnam when he won the 91 Masters, and you look at the putt he made, he used a Maxfly HT golf ball, which was a gamer golf ball back in the day. But he hits that putt to win, and it's about 10 feet. And that ball is in the air without the Maxfly logo moving into forward motion for a long, long time. Look, that's how the equipment was back then. No issue. He had one of those Tad Moore putters that would have had about probably 3.75 aloft on it. But the bottom line is, unless you are using something nowadays that's come on, it's got the grooves in it and it gets it into forward motion, you're just not going to get the benefit that you can have of technology in the putter face, because you're not creating much ball speed with a putter. So it's all about friction. It's all about, path. If the face is off, and by path, I mean face. If the face is off, it'll impact it more than the path. It's the same as the clubs.
Yeah.
The face is what's going to give you major, major issues. So your man there who's got that 15-degree arc, I get it. But if the face isn't married up on those points in the mirror, then you're obviously toast. Which is why, I mean, this putter I keep waving around, this is an arm lock. And that's why I keep coming back to this, because there are two things in putting, and we're getting into it now, but Jason Day's a big one for this.
Yeah.
Lie and loft. But it's not necessarily lie of the putter. It's maintaining the lie angle throughout the strokes. If you look at Jace, like, he's very much in a perfect posture. Everything looks symmetrical and aligned, and then his head doesn't move, and he's able to get that thoracic spine just doing what I'm doing there without anything moving. Now, when I putt, it's flipping this and it's this exaggerated. But the bottom line is like, the reason these guys go to the gym so much is the core gets super strong, and then they're able to disconnect the thoracic and the spine, disconnect the movement, and get everything sort of going separate. And I think if you look at Jace, which is another great training drill, he has like a steel wire that he puts out, that if he's putting on here, this steel wire runs along the golf shaft, and he just keeps the golf shaft on the same lie angle as it's moving through the stroke. And then you don't lose the face plane tilt, which we've seen in drivers when you change lie angle, but you're also less likely to manipulate the loft. But that's why I think that it's no surprise to me, like lab putters and the broomstick, how it's done so great. The broomstick is sort of getting going again, because it's just easier to keep that thing in a great loft and lie if you can get efficient at doing it. And I think the same can be said for arm lock as well. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of guys going to claw and things like that, because all you're doing is you're locking in the path and the lie angle and the face.
I have never thought about it so much in the lie angle side of things. And I think when you definitely see Jason Dane, I want to ask you why you think he was so good. That was one of my questions actually on the Taylormade guys, is he's so deliberate in his setup position, right? Like when you're working with him and you're watching him, when you're helping him with his putting, trying to get the putter specs right, does he take that same deliberate setup routine all the time?
Yeah, and obviously Cole Swatton was out a lot with him during the time I was out there, and Cole was great. He would be amazing at keeping the crap out. You know what I mean? Like on tour, there's so much. Like, we're deep in the weeds of these conversations. Wouldn't happen on tour. You know what I mean? Like, I've taken it there, but you couldn't. Like, Colin doesn't want that for his player. And then I think the answer to your question, you've gone to routine, which on the outside looking in, of course, that's the obvious answer. But the reason Jason Day was the best putter I think I've ever seen was all his mentality. He just was very strong-willed that that ball was going to roll the way he wanted it and it was going to go in the hole. I only ever saw him struggling once, and he was extremely short-tempered with himself, extremely hard with himself, and he wasn't in a mood to have polite BS conversation. Like, he was fixing this issue and fixing it quick, and you needed just to get out the way and let it be, or adjust stuff to help him. But what you're doing needs to be factual and correct. And he wasn't just going to take anyone's word for it. And there was a sensor motion product that I spent loads of time on, and beat myself up on at times to please the sensor with the ratio of the stroke at different positions. I remember chatting to Jace about it once in Palm Springs, and Jace said, "Oh yeah, I had to go on that. I used it once." And I was like, "What do you mean used it once? Like they reckon this thing is the best product ever made." And he's just like, "Yeah, my stuff didn't match up to that. I'm not using it."
Interesting.
That mentality, though, is something I didn't have. Like, I've spent, we talked about it. I haven't played golf for a long time, but I've spent a lot of time coming back into the game, trying to please a launch monitor, please a sensor motion, please the mirror. The only thing you got to please in this game is the golf ball. And it's like, if you can do that, the best players, well, guess what? You become one of the best players in the world. It's not like there's no further on. You become those guys, the reason they hit it so good. And you obviously saw Tiger go out there and that famous thing about the divots, no divots. Tiger's played tournaments taking divots bigger than anyone in the game.
Yeah,
You know what I
I've got
mean?
plenty
He
of proof.
doesn't care. He's pleasing the golf ball and he's hitting the shot. And I think when you get to people that are listening to this podcast, I do think that they're going into a world which I love. I'm in it. You're in it. But it's deep. Like, there's a certain type of golfer that's in here. And sometimes you just got to look at what the ball is doing in order to find your way out of a problem,
Yeah, and to kind of close on that back to basics putting segment, I really like what you said there and the way that Jason's approach is to it, because it seems to me like he looked at it and potentially subconsciously or consciously said, if I spend some time on this, am I going to get better at putting? You know what I mean? Like, is this actually going to make me better? And he probably looked at it and went, you know what? I know what works. I don't need to be told that I'm putting good, or need to be told that I'm not putting good. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't need it. Take it
So
out of my life.
I spent some time 2 weeks ago with Michael Phelps, right? The Olympian, best Olympian ever. And he said to me, on his route to achieve what he achieved, he couldn't listen to anyone, because the truth is nobody's achieved what he wanted to achieve. So who can he turn to for advice? Because he's the one who's going to do it. And he's going to do something that no human has ever done. So who the hell does he go to? And it was like an eye-opening moment to be like, wow, that's kind of like the mentality you got to have when you're not playing well. You're the one who's got to get out of it,
That sounds very Tigerish. But to close off on the back to basics putting segment, thanks for that, Trottie. It was fantastic. I love that tip. It's great. The guys at Back to Basics are going to love that one. Support the podcast. TM15, 15% off. Links are down below. Now, when you spoke there about that, before we get into Taylormade guys, right, and girls, when you said about Michael Phelps there, I nearly kind of felt like I read something or seen something around a potential mindset shift around Nelly Korda recently. Obviously, she's been on this absolute incredible run. Kind of like, I was talking to someone on this podcast recently, and she's talking, it might have been her, or I heard some information anyway, about how she's kind of cut the crap out as well. And not the crap out, I don't know her or anything, or inside the circle, but just like, I'm the best. I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, taking a little bit of ownership, like that Michael Phelps type of thing. Do you think that's what's kind of happened with Nelly lately? Like, she's just switched a gear, or?
Yeah, I mean, I got to spend a bit of time with her at the photo shoot in the fall last year, and she's just the same as the other super successful ones, in the sense that she's very much in control of her emotions and what she's doing, and she's very aware of her surroundings. That, to me, seems to be the underlying thing with all of these great, great athletes. They're aware of who they are, aware of what they're capable of, and aware of who's around them at any given time. Did she have a shift in personality, in terms of traits, in terms of the way she's thinking about things? I don't know, maybe. I mean, she's obviously playing unbelievable golf.
Unbelievable.
I think it's a form of dedication and commitment to it, but I just think she's very in control of her whole life, which, if we look at Scheffler, that seems to be the same for him too. And I think whenever you get in a place like that with the talent these guys have, you become dangerous.
Oh, dangerous is the word. And I yeah, I'm just like, in today's day and age, right, where everyone is so good, and I shouldn't say that in that way. Like, everyone has always been great on the tours, right? But now, like, you've seen it firsthand. Like, any given day, everyone is just so hot, and there's guys on tours and tours below who all can get so hot. But just in this day and age, when everyone is so good, just how those two are being so dominant right now is mind blowing. Like, to me, mind blowing, because
Yeah.
you can't hide.
No, but obviously, like, certainly for Scottie, there'll be stats backing up the schedule he's got, where he's going, why he's going there. He knows he's the best in the world right now in the men's game, and the places he's going, he knows he can get it done there because everything's in his favour. And then
Yeah.
add in, obviously, a fantastic moment of his life with the baby coming and whatnot. I think there's a lot of reason that it's planned. This isn't all just falling into place because, these guys aren't leaving a stone unturned, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I understand where you're coming from there, and talk about being in the right place, but there's a lot to it. Like,
But
there's
you get
a
you
lot
get a
to it.
moment though, Toby. Again, like, since being here in the States, and certainly in the last 12 months, I got to spend a bit
Yeah,
of time with these quite a few basketball guys who've won the NBA championship a few times and whatnot. And we're talking about different positions, different players, different
yeah,
personalities. And the thing that comes out, and Jace Day said this to me as well, you're going to be in a moment, and we've all had it as golfers. I mean, I could list 5 or 6 massive shots over my pointless golf career that's not even worth talking about. But
yeah.
you have those moments where you have to step up and run into the fire. Jace has said it, and a basketball player said it to me. You got to run at the fire. And it's
Yeah.
like, they're the moments, and you know when they're happening in golf, because it's not like a game of basketball that's moving at pace, or a game of football that's happening all around you and there's another 10 players on your team, 11 on the opposing team. It's not like that. You know when it's happening, because it might be you with a 5-iron over water or whatever, and you got to hit the shot. And I just think that both those players we're talking about, who are dominating the game right now, can manage that moment and not make it greater than what it actually is, which is a 5-iron from 220 or whatever it is.
I think that is a perfect line. Not making it greater than it actually is. When you talk about, like, people in a good place, remember in John Rahm maybe 2 years ago, with the whole COVID situation, got pulled out of the tournament leading by 8, and then got stuck in a bloody hotel room, and comes out and wins the US Open the next time. like,
Yeah.
like that should not be. If you look at it from a physical level and a mental level, right? Physically, that shouldn't have happened due to the nature of his whole schedule being thrown out, and not being able to train as well. But it just shows you emotionally where he was at to be able to get that done. It was incredible, right?
But wasn't he getting married at that time, or getting engaged?
Sorry?
Didn't he get engaged at that time?
I think he might have been engaged or married, or maybe the child. Maybe the child.
You know where he got engaged was in San Diego, and the
Oh,
tournament,
okay.
the
You
tournament
joke.
in San Diego at Torrey Pines. Like, he loves Torrey Pines, and he won the tour event that was there
Yeah.
before the US Open. So
Yeah.
everything about that, he just had to physically get himself to Torrey Pines, because he knew in his mind that, like, that's his place. And
Yeah.
you get a player like that thinking that way, and all of a sudden, it's going to be phenomenal. So I think there's a greater force with all this, and there's little things that puts the human sport of athlete mind at rest. And I think for John, that was one of them for sure.
Love it. Hey, let's talk about Kingdom for a little bit, right? And the time you spend there. And I'll particularly talk about just some players that you've kind of hung out with there. What was the first time, I'm assuming, have you fitted Tiger Woods before? And what was the first time like doing that and meeting him?
So I've done stuff with Tiger and his putter. I can't even remember where we were. somewhere in the mid Americas. And yeah, I did some stuff with him with his putter when he changed into that TaylorMade Ardmore. That is pretty much as deep as I've gone with him. The
Yeah.
metal woods were all done in Florida with a guy called Keith Sabarbaro at the time. The irons were so quick and easy. That was done with the engineers more than anyone on tour. But yeah, I was fortunate to do quite a bit of stuff with the putter with him. It was the same as everyone else in the
Yeah.
sense of the work we were doing. I remember he questioned some of it, the lie angle changes we made. He's like, that's not quite right. I think that's off. And, you'd go back and you're like, shit, yeah, it is off. He's right. Then you
Wow.
got to decide how. But again, when you're in a work situation with him and not a media situation, you got to just like less is more there massively. Like, I mean, it's Tiger Woods. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
A, let's not screw this up. And B, let's have a lot of respect for the guy because he absolutely deserves it in the game of golf for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard when people have kind of worked with players like that, or I've got friends of mine that work in media with celebrities at a radio station or something, and they talk about when they have the big ones come in that they kind of nearly they just switch so much into work mode and needing to do the right interview in the workplace. Like if they're interviewing them, for a radio station, whatever, they don't really take that time to get overall by it all by the person that they're with due to the nature of they've just got to get it done right. But
Yeah, I
Tiger,
mean, obviously for me in the media stuff, I've had so many great people now. But on the same
yeah,
note, like I've worked with some amazing players from like Sevi
yeah,
through to Langer through to your Hale Irwins, your Weiskopfs, your Woosnams, your Faldos. Then you get up into and that for me was a bit more intimidating because like they were childhood legends. And then you
yeah,
start to do stuff with like the Keimers and the Roses, the Garcias. That didn't really feel like anything because they were just pretty much the same age as me, just guys on tour, and
mm,
I was working with them. And then obviously
yeah,
the youth comes through, and at this point, it's like, well, I've worked with everybody now. What does it even matter? So
yeah,
I remember the first interview I did with Tiger was on a podcast for TaylorMade, and that was interesting because I was going outside of my comfort zone. I've got to interview this guy. He's only ever done one podcast before at this point in time, and I get given a script from TaylorMade, so I get it. I've got to follow the script, and I read it, and I was like, "This sucks. It just sucks. It's rubbish." So I remember going into TaylorMade to the CMO and just being like, "Listen, mate, have you seen the script for Tiger?" No. I said, he's like, why, what's up? And I said, I don't like it. And he's like, well, if you think you can do better, you write it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm not a copywriter, but I think I can do better and I'm going to write that thing. And I've changed it completely and I still got the corporate points in, but I was able to ask some questions that I had for him rather
mm,
than what was just written down. And I think it made him see like I was a golfer. And I think that was a big moment, like in the sort of my relationship with him. He's like, okay, this guy's, I can trust 45 minutes with this guy. He's not going to take me to a place I don't want to
mm,
go. And he's not going to
mm,
ask me like questions that aren't even worth asking. So
yeah,
that was intimidating. And I certainly couldn't relax until it was out the way.
yeah,
The more you do these things, the better you get. I mean, the next thing you find yourself with Michael Phelps. I don't know anything about swimming, but I can
yeah.
ask him some great questions about how he became who he became. But that's just new skills. That's pivoting, which is exactly what we said at the start of this whole thing.
Can you tell me Roy McIlroy's driver? What's his latest kind of TrackMan stuff that you've seen there on the range? What's
I
his?
just think the thing that you always see with him is his apex is so high.
Yeah,
The launch and the spin numbers are always great, but I think the thing that you notice the most when you see him live, he's hitting it probably 20 feet higher than what you might expect. And that's
yeah,
even if you expect a high ball flight. This guy is
yeah,
sending this thing to the moon, and it's a domey moon flight, and it goes forever. Obviously, it's impressive. The sound is great. But look, I mean, it's just high. That's the one
yeah.
thing that will always hit you with watching him hit golf balls.
And so what's his like rough swing direction AOA? Like what's it kind of?
So his attack
How's it getting?
angle is always shallow, and I remember when we bought out it's like the inertia generator they called it on the sim, which was that bar underneath the sim. And he's like, if I really go for one, I can get 4 or 5 degrees up. And he said, and then I catch the back of this sim driver on the tee. He's like, he basically wanted to address that with the engineers, and the engineers were like, yeah, it kind of is what it is. You got to have it in there. So yeah, he's shallow. He's pretty shallow.
That's and so. Who is the best driver you've seen? Is it Rory?
No, I've got three. I'd have him,
Yes,
Dustin, and Garcia.
Dustin. Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
Garcia.
and what's so good about just his control, Dustin as well? Obviously, it's a long way as well, but his control or
Yeah, you're just in the presence of an amazing athlete, this big man that just hits these bleeder cuts, and it's
yeah,
just effortless. But I
yeah,
think in terms of obviously the power out of Rory's phenomenal, but for me the consistency for Garcia is he'd probably be the best I've seen.
yeah.
Which people might be like, "What are you talking about? Like he hasn't won much." But guys, I mean, it's just you can put your eye line in a window, and your eyes won't have to move from the same 10 feet window to see the apex of every shot he hits.
That's so
It's
good.
so good.
I've seen Garcia. Well, I remember when I was a kid on Europe, he won. I think it was 3 times in a row as well in Europe. Like, yeah, man, he was the man when I was a kid, right? I think we're about the same age, right?
Yeah,
Tell
he's
me,
he's ridiculous. He's really good.
I was actually talking to Jerome about him last time because you never see anything of Sergio much on social media. Like you see, obviously, Rory always someone's filming Rory and posting it. I said to Jerome, "What's Sergio doing on the range? Like, is he working on anything? Is he trying to empty out the lag in from 4 to 5? Like, what's he trying to do?" And he goes, "He just hits shots, Toby. He just hits balls all the time. He just hits balls, hits shots. That's all he does."
Yeah.
Tell me about iron play. I've got written down here Colin Morikawa, right? Just kind of run through these ones and then I'll leave you alone. Colin Morikawa, is he some of the best iron play you've seen recently? And who are your top three kind of iron play guys you've seen?
Best I've seen recently for sure is Colin. I think if you look at the best you've ever, you can't obviously talk without talking about Tiger.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. And then for me, I think it's pretty evident. Like I like the guys from when I was young, so I'd put a Lathabal in there as well. Just
yeah,
phenomenal iron player, great to watch hit balls. But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, Colin is the modern day gamer when it comes to that. Just and how he does his due diligence on the equipment. He's very much like Justin Rose in that sense. Just goes through it all. But yeah, and then obviously watching Tiger hit irons and getting numbers on it is ridiculous.
And if someone was to ask you why is Colin so good at, what do you see that he does differently? He's
He can
just doing it better.
control the amount of shape that he puts on the ball very well. And then as a
Yeah,
result of doing that, he can then control the landing and the peak height. So he can always get close to flags because he can just control the movement well and the divot depth really well and the
yeah.
direction well. So it's just a great deal of control when it comes to the club head.
And okay, next one. I could be wrong here out of school. Scottie Scheffler, he's a Taylormade guy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen Scottie's stuff. I saw one of the most amazing videos of all time. One of my favorite videos is when he's sitting in the middle of a fairway, just in a t-shirt, talking with a TaylorMade guy, and he's hitting some shots with a TrackMan there, and he guesses the
The
carry
numbers.
distance.
Yeah.
It's nearly like it's fake. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah, but
Unbelievable. If people haven't seen it, it's incredible. Like,
you
have
have
you
to
witnessed him
believe
do
that
it?
if you were hitting balls, Toby, and I gave you 2 weeks, I
Yeah.
think you could call out your numbers pretty good.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Oh, God, but
If you hit balls every day for 2 weeks,
yes,
I could.
you don't reckon you reckon I'm kind of pumping it up more than what it's actually worth,
I
the
think I
skill.
think that even if like, yeah, I mean, it's a great test. I did it with Rose Zhang on a YouTube video of mine. Now the hard
Yeah.
part we had is we were hitting downhill like 20 yards and it was into wind, so it was tough to tell. But
Oh,
she was
yeah.
great. She was great at it. It's
Was
like,
she?
yeah, but you'd expect it if you're hitting balls
Mm,
every day, mate. You
yeah, I
know
get it.
your feel,
Yeah.
and they know their stock yardages. Then you just look at the flight and you're like, yeah, that's doing that or it's doing this, and you
Yeah.
obviously use whatever monitor they used every week, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, that's going to be that. And I
Yeah.
think it's when you hit a shot even now, and you'll be like, oh, get up, and if it's
Yeah,
not.
I get it. I
So
get it.
I
Well,
think
just
it's
when I
cool.
saw him with yeah, it was like driver 3 wood, and it was
Yeah.
like 289, and it was like 289. You know, like that was yeah. Anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. But one thing I will say when I've seen him, and I want to ask you about his kind of precision, right? And because I wasn't too sure if that's one of the leading things to why he's so good as well, is that he just has such a good understanding of how far each one's going and just what he's going to get out of each shot, even though he's calling it after the shot. But I was watching him on the range once, and I'm a big molded grip guy, right? So I use my molded grip and all the time. And on the telecast, I was watching the Masters on the range thing, and they were just kind of talking about Scottie Scheffler, and they didn't mention that he hit 3 shots in a row, 179, 179, 179. Like it was remarkable. Like you could just see it kind of on the thing there. It's just the consistency of how far these guys carry it, right? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but again, though, if you're hitting balls in
Mm,
in you're comfortable in your environment and you're
yeah.
hitting them, and there's no one talking to you, it's just you and you're comfortable. I still think if I gave you a 7 iron and left you alone, you'd hit them all pretty close to one another.
Yeah. Yeah, I get you. Hey, thanks. Hey, you've seen me swing it. That's why you're saying it, right?
Exactly.
Well, I got. All right. Couple of questions. I'll let you go. Right.
Sure.
Tell me. A couple of just throwaway questions. One-liners. What's your favorite takeaway food?
I can't get it in America very good, but Indian food.
Oh, how
Yeah,
good is Indian food?
it is good in
Yes,
the UK.
I've spent many a time in India. What's your favorite course?
Good question. Great question. We had this chat yesterday or this week because I was at that Bandon Trails. It's a good golf
Mm,
course. I, I'd have to default and say Hoylake
okay.
because it's where I grew up.
Yeah.
So it has huge advantage. But I would be putting in like Trump Turnberry is amazing. Carnoustie is amazing. Birkdale
Mm,
is amazing. And
yeah.
Hoylake, which is probably not as good of a golf course as those other three, but it wins for me just because of what it means to me. So Hoylake.
Yeah. And I love when I hear you talk, Trotty, because you definitely uh, show a lot of respect to your elder golfers that you hang around with and on the European tour. And, you kind of, I'm not going to say you haven't like forgotten about Europe, right? But every time I talk to you about something or you always give that time and reflect on it. It's not like you've let it go or moved on and I'm this UK guy living in America. You seem to have this real good respect and
Yeah,
kind
and
of
it's
still
interesting. Again, I had this chat the other day with someone. I, if you ever get, it's very rare that people get to do it. But if you ever get to do the jobs that I've done, the
mm,
European piece was probably the most fun, to be honest.
yeah,
The European tour was in a good place. I don't know anything about the tour right now, but it doesn't seem as in a good tour golf right now is a mess period. We should
it's a
probably
shame.
just leave that there.
Yeah, it's a
But
shame.
the European tour doesn't seem to be the product it was. And when
It's not.
I was a kid, it was the place to play. Like,
Yeah.
and Sandy Lyle was winning, and you go through the 80s when I was a kid, and these
Mm,
players, it was the place. And then
yeah.
everyone, well, Faldo kind of led the charge, and everyone went to play the PGA Tour, and the PGA Tour was the place. And now who knows what the place is, but whatever. But the point is that like when I got on the European tour, it was expanding out into Asia and just going out of London Heathrow, as it sounds like you've traveled, but going to all these
Yeah.
different countries and you'd be in a different place with a new challenge, be it a language,
Mm,
a roadmap, be it golfers who didn't speak English, be it was just we'd go to South Africa, we'd go to Dubai, which was developing, we'd go down to Oz. And like those times really shaped my life and career. And they
mm,
were hard, but they were great. And then after that, I went to live in Asia for a while. That was also great. But when I got to America, I was just like, wow, this is the top of the tree, but every town is kind of similar. You've got a steak,
yeah.
you've got a Starbucks, and you've
Yeah.
got an airline that you don't need to show a passport for. It's
Yeah.
great. I love it. I love the convenience of America. I live here. It's
Yeah.
home. It's got some great mates here, but it's still like you can't. You know what I mean? If I took you out of Australia, you'd still be an
Mm,
Aussie. you know?
Oh no, I get it. I love that, but I love what you talk about there because we live in the West, right? Australia and America are very similar, right? And I'm going to use the term plain Jane. And I try to talk to my father-in-law about this. He's like, why do you love to travel so much? Why do you jump to Europe or take the kids to Asia or take the kids to Europe? And I was like, I love just going around a corner in a different country, needing to know about the language and saying hello and trying to find a cup of coffee or trying to find somewhere to play with the kids. I love that excitement, and I think today when we've got everything, the technology, it has taken a lot of the excitement out. Like when you talk about, when you're traveling around back in that day, like what is in this country or what happens when I go to Australia? Because you don't really know. It's just what you saw on TV or stories that you heard, right? So, yeah, I can understand that. The old school, but the European tour, mate, in Australia, it was huge to watch.
Yeah.
We watched PGA Tour in the morning, European Tour at night.
Yeah.
Like it was the biggest thing. Like I remember when Greg Norman told Adam Scott, go play the European Tour before we go to America. But like you say, that's a whole other
Do you know what?
conversation.
The Aussies on the European tour, hands down, were the best guys on the tour. They were amazing. And I'm going to like Marcus Fraser, Wade Ormsby, Lonard was out there for a bit. Allen, was it Allen, little guy, the assassin?
Stephen
guy?
Allen.
He was a hell of a player. And then
Great
the
player.
Aussie boys would just be so awesome. And like the banter was legit. And they were just like, I became very good mates with Marcus Fraser and hung out with him a ton and just never struggled like in his company. Just always great. All the caddies that they'd bring out would be proper good lads. And it was just like, these lads are just the best. And it was, I remember that was a great thing about Europe and having the Aussies. And obviously in the States, there's a crew of Aussies, but the ones who got into America, other than this was just after like the Lonards of this world, much more serious. They were very professional about their game. Like Adam Scott, very professional. Even like Allenby and Appleby, very like strict on how they practice and stuff. Whereas the lads that got to the European tour were just out and out cracking lads, like cracking lads.
Scottie Gardner's a friend of mine, and he went the European tour as well. And he talked about that, about kind of they used to always travel together and stay together, and a lot of fun.
And but they would always welcome you in. They weren't like oh nah, if you're like our mate, they were of course, come join us. All of them. It was great fun.
It's a good relationship between the UK and America anyway as well, because Australia, UK and Australians. Like two of my groomsmen at my wedding are from England, right? And and my wife says to me all the time, she's like, "Do you ever have any Australian friends?" When I was living in Manly, I was like, "We just got along so well."
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because again, I was chatting to someone today. The only other place I think I could go from San Diego would be Melbourne. Like that would be the natural if you're going to leave San Diego. But the problem is for you boys, it's 15 hours to get anywhere.
It's too far. I know,
brutal.
I know, it's so far. And I got friends now living in the States and who moved over there and have got kids, and I really want to take my kids there, but I just am a little concerned about the 16. I think it's like, what's it like, 12 to JFK or 13 to JFK, and then another 6 down to, to go to LA, then JFK. It's a long way.
Yeah, it's brutal.
With 3 kids. I don't want to be doing that. All right. If you could be any athlete in the world, non-golfer, who would it be? Last question.
I think after meeting him, I think it would have been pretty cool to have been Phelps, to be honest. Just after meeting him, he seems in a pretty good place, but like what he achieved was ridiculous. Now that's swimming, and maybe swimming isn't the most sexiest of sports, but you're talking about maybe the best athlete of all time. So I think if you elaborate on that, because swimming is probably too close to golf because it's also an individual sport. So then I think that the way I've sort of been looking at stuff recently, I'd have to look at team sports. And I think that also I mentioned basketball players, been around a lot of them, and you realize this huge team camaraderie that these guys have. So I think as you then start to do that, I'm a fan of Liverpool, so you'd have to think of like a Liverpool player and then someone who's idolized and seems to have a good career up there. You'd look at someone like a Jamie Carragher or someone who played for Liverpool just because he still lives in the city, he's still connected to it, he's in the media, he's very much a part of it. And I think that once you're in a team, that's another great thing. I think it would be like being in a band. Golf and swimming is so singular and individual that it's all on you. I think if you're in a team situation, then you're pretty good. But I mean, Jamie Carragher wasn't that good at football, maybe in this. So you'd look at someone like Thierry Henry or someone. Like
Yeah, Thierry Henry. Yes, that's someone that's a bit more people the public know. Trottie, I'm gonna let you go, mate. You've been fantastic with your time. I really, really appreciate you coming on, mate. You got more gigs than a fucking stadium full of rock stars, and I love seeing all the stuff you're doing. And keep up the good work, mate.
Thanks. We shall see how it goes. Appreciate it, and thanks for everything.
Thanks, brother.
Awesome.